Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Abigail always believed she had found the right man, the kind any woman would dream of having by her side. Michael was more than a good husband, he was her companion, her safe haven, her best friend. For 18 years, they built a life based on respect, partnership, and love. He was never one of those men who hide and work to escape home. On the contrary, he made sure to be present in every moment, from the most important dates to the simplest daily situations. He helped with chores, took care of the kids, planned trips, made surprises, and even when tired after a full day's work, he always found a way to make her smile. Michael was the kind of man who would call in the middle of his workday just to ask if she needed anything or simply to say that he loved her. On their wedding anniversaries, he made sure to prepare something special. He never stopped buying flowers, never stopped making declarations, and never stopped taking care of every detail of the house, life, and family. He carried the kind of responsibility many avoid, and he did it with pride. He worked hard, managed everything, paid the bills, and made sure nothing was missing. And when I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing: no affection, no attention, no comfort, no emotional security. Abigail always knew she could count on him for anything. If she was sick, he dropped everything to take care of her. If she had a problem, he was the first to sit down and listen, ready to help. They lived years that any couple would envy: trips, outings, dinners, building dreams together. They had a beautiful house, the result of a lot of effort and dedication. They had a routine that seemed to work, children well on their way, financial stability, and above all, love. But, as in almost every long-term relationship, time brought changes. What once was excitement turned into habit. What once was novelty became routine. And little by little, without realizing it, Abigail began questioning whether this perfect life was really all she wanted. She started looking in the mirror and feeling like, in some way, her youth was being swallowed by days that all seemed the same. Conversations with her friends no longer excited her. Saturday nights, which she used to look forward to with anticipation, started to feel like just another night. The breakfasts she prepared with care gradually became automatic. And that love, which once made her heart race, seemed to have been tucked away in a drawer, not because of Michael's lack of care, because he remained the same man he'd always been, but because inside her grew a restlessness hard to explain, as if something was missing, even though rationally she knew she had everything. It was in this whirlwind of thoughts that life decided to make another unexpected move. Her younger sister, Charlotte, appeared at the door with swollen eyes and a defeated expression, saying her marriage had come to an end. Without thinking twice, Abigail opened the doors of her home, her heart, her family. After all, she was her sister, and family is for that. Only the story Charlotte carried on her back wasn't just any story. She had been caught cheating on her own husband. And that, for anyone, would already be serious. But for Abigail, who always condemned such behavior, it was heavy. Even so, she chose not to judge. She preferred to be support, to be shelter, to be the sister who extends a hand when everything collapses. In the first few days, Charlotte seemed like a broken woman. She said she was sorry, that her marriage had worn out, that it was her fault, that she didn't know what to do with her life. She cried a lot, spent hours lying down, not wanting to talk to anyone. And Abigail, full of compassion, did everything to comfort her, give support, and help in any way. But it only took a few days for the mask of fragility to start falling. Little by little, Charlotte returned to being who she always was. That woman full of opinions, ready-made phrases, who liked to feel free, who always joked about women who dedicated themselves exclusively to family. And so, in an almost imperceptible way, Charlotte began to infiltrate Abigail's thoughts. Always with that light, relaxed speech, like someone who just wants to help but who, in reality, was planting dangerous seeds. "Abby, do you realize you only live for the house? Your husband is wonderful, yes, but what about you? Where are you in all this story? Do you really think you were born to be just a wife and mother? And these words began to hammer in Abigail's head in a way she had never felt before. What once seemed nonsense started to make sense. She began to look at her reflection and question if, in fact, she wasn't wasting the best years of her life taking care of a marriage that, in her mind, had lost its charm. The strangest thing was that, even though she knew Michael was everything any woman would ask God for, it no longer seemed enough. She didn't know if it was her sister's influence, if it was a passing crisis, or if it was a long-hidden desire finally surfacing. She only knew that, for the first time in almost 2 decades, she felt a mix of emptiness, doubt, and a strange desire to experience something she herself didn't fully understand. And this confusion inside her only grew with each passing day. And the more Charlotte talked, the more she began to wonder if the perfect life she had built was really perfect. Because, when someone plants doubt, it grows like a weed, silently, and, before you know it, it takes over everything. Charlotte quickly returned to being the woman she always was. She moved around the house with a light, carefree demeanor, as if that episode of her destroyed marriage had already been erased from memory. And every time she opened her mouth, she came with loaded comments, disguised criticisms, and advice that entered Abigail's mind like a kind of silent virus. It always started with that tone of someone who just wants to help. You know, Abby. I look at you and wonder, until when are you going to live like this? You're beautiful, intelligent, you have so much life ahead of you, and here you are, trapped in this life that doesn't offer you anything beyond routine, bills to pay. When are you going to truly live? At first, Abigail reacted with that uncomfortable, somewhat embarrassed smile, like someone who hears but tries not to take it too seriously. But no matter how much she pretended those words didn't affect her, every phrase launched by her sister seemed to find a space, a crack, a fissure inside her that she didn't even know existed. Charlotte's persistence became increasingly direct, sharper, harder to ignore. She began bringing up examples of women who, according to her, decided to break free from the monotony and allowed themselves to live. Remember our cousin Melissa? She left everything. Marriage, house, that boring little life, and look at her now. She travels, meets people, has fun. Life is this, Abby. We're born to live. And you know what else? Men do this all the time. And here we are, erasing ourselves, fading away, losing the best years, waiting for what? The end of life to regret everything we didn't do? These conversations started to repeat almost every day. At the breakfast table, on the living room couch, in the car, in any moment of silence, Charlotte always seemed to have a ready phrase, a calculated provocation, a distorted memory, all carefully prepared to generate exactly the effect it was creating. And as the days passed, Abigail began to question more and more if her sister was really wrong. Those thoughts that she once would have judged absurd began to make sense in a way she didn't fully understand. Abigail tried to shield herself, tried to argue. She said that Michael had always been a great husband, that he never lacked anything, that he always took care of her, that he always did everything for her. But for every argument, Charlotte had a sharp, cutting response ready to disarm any defense. He's wonderful, yes, but since when being a good man means you should accept giving up yourself? The problem isn't him, Abby, the problem is you thinking that's enough. And it's not. You deserve more. You deserve to live. You deserve to feel again what it's like to be desired, to be seen, to be admired. You look in the mirror and see who? A wife? A housewife? A woman who let time swallow who she really was? Until one morning, Charlotte appeared in the bedroom with that mischievous, slightly mocking smile, holding the car keys. Abby, let's go out. Just you and me. Coffee, a chat, clear your mind, breathe a little. We've been so stuck in this house that it feels like even the air here is heavy. And, without thinking much, Abigail agreed. She needed to get out, clear her mind, understand what was happening inside her, try to somehow bring order to the chaos her mind had become. They got in the car, chatting about trivial matters, laughing about silly things, as if it were just a casual outing between sisters. But along the way, Charlotte changed her tone. "You know, I know a place nearby. It's very quiet, secluded, up in the mountains. It's like a cafe, but quite different, charming, with few people. Perfect to relax, talk, have a drink, escape the monotony a bit." Abigail, with that internal voice divided between suspicion and curiosity, accepted. The route seemed normal, but as the car climbed toward the mountains, something began to feel off. The place really seemed isolated. And when Charlotte parked, Abigail realized this was far from being a cafe. It was a cabin. Simple, discreet, somewhat hidden, as if it had been waiting for them. It didn't take long for her to understand that this meeting wouldn't just be between two sisters. Two men were at the door, smiling, greeting Charlotte like old acquaintances. She, in turn, acted as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Abigail froze. She looked at her sister, then at the men, and felt her whole body go cold. Charlotte, noticing the discomfort, approached and whispered in her ear, with a tone that mixed provocation and encouragement. "Relax, they're friends of mine. Good people. Life is there, for those who have the courage to live it." Abigail's heart raced. Everything inside her screamed that this was wrong, that it wasn't part of who she was. But at the same time, that other side, the one her sister had been feeding day after day, whispered, "Maybe this is what you need, to feel alive again." And at that moment, what she didn't know, was that she was about to make the decision that would change her life forever. As soon as she crossed the threshold of the cabin, Abigail felt as if she had entered a parallel world. Charlotte was completely at ease, smiling, chatting as if it were just another ordinary afternoon. The two men, relaxed, opened beers, pulled up chairs, and started small talk, joking around, laughing loudly, casting glances that made their intentions clear. Abigail tensed up, crossed her arms, tried to keep her distance, glanced at her watch discreetly, searching for any excuse to leave. She even said she wasn't comfortable, that this wasn't part of her life, that she was married and loved her family. Charlotte, as always, smiled, shook her head, cracked jokes, and threw out phrases as if nothing there was truly serious. "Relax, Abby, it's just conversation, we're just having fun, nobody's forcing anyone." But the pressure became a trap disguised as relaxation. Alcohol began to flow, laughter became looser, jokes bolder. One of the guys, more direct, pulled Abigail by the hand with that confident smile, as if he knew she was about to give in. And at that moment, everything she had ever believed in began to crumble. Right and wrong lost their boundaries. Conscience screamed, but her body was already surrendering to a mix of adrenaline, fear, desire, regret, and guilt. And when she realized it, she was already lying with that man, erasing, even if for a few hours, everything she had built over 18 years. And when it was over, just a moment of silence was enough for her to feel the immense weight of what she had just done. Regret hit her as fast as she put her clothes back on. And in that uncomfortable silence, neither Charlotte nor the men seemed to care about the consequences. But inside Abigail, a war began, one she never imagined facing. In the following days, she tried to live as if nothing had happened. She pretended normalcy. She made breakfast, did laundry, smiled at Michael, asked about work, as if her life hadn't been thrown into a shredder. Outwardly, she was the same wife as always. Inside, she was a mix of panic and guilt. And even carrying that suffocating weight, she tried to convince herself that it had been a slip-up, something that could be buried forever, forgotten, swept from memory. But life has a cruel way of showing that certain mistakes have long legs, that secrets, no matter how well guarded, find doors, windows, and cracks to escape through. And it was on a random night, while Michael was in the living room scrolling through his phone, that everything began to unravel completely. He heard a voice coming from the guest bedroom. It was Charlotte, talking on the phone. At first, he didn't pay much attention. But as the words became clearer, he felt his stomach churn. She was recounting, without filters, every detail of what had happened in the cabin. She described everything from the moment they arrived to the laughter, provocations, insinuations, and worst of all, exactly how Abigail, after some resistance, ended up giving in. Michael froze. His head spun. His heart raced as if it would rip through his chest. For a few seconds, he thought he was hearing wrong, that maybe it was a joke, some misunderstanding. But every word out of his sister-in-law's mouth only confirmed what he never imagined he'd have to live through. It was real. It was cruel. It was devastating. He stood still, staring into space, trying to process if this was really happening. And as Charlotte continued the conversation, laughing, speaking naturally as if it were just another adventure, something inside him simply broke. Pain came with a mix of anger, disbelief, and a void that seemed impossible to fill. And for the first time in his life, Michael felt that he had been betrayed in the dirtiest, cruelest, and most cowardly way a man could experience. The betrayal didn't just come from his wife. It also came from within his own home, from someone he had welcomed, helped, treated like family. Without making a scene, without shouting, he took a deep breath and, when Charlotte ended the call and went to another room, he called Abigail to talk. She came in calmly, unaware of what was coming. She sat across from him and noticed, by his gaze, that something was very wrong. Michael held his own hands, took a deep breath, and asked, looking directly into her eyes, with a coldness she had never seen before, "Tell me, is what happened in the cabin true?" For a few seconds, time seemed to stop. Abigail froze. Words disappeared from her mouth. Her whole body trembled. And at that moment, there was no more room for lies. She tried to open her mouth, but the guilt was so overwhelming that before any word came out, he already had his answer. She was crumbling right there, in front of him. Michael stayed silent for a few seconds, observing the woman he had loved for so many years, the one he believed he knew better than anyone in the world, and who, suddenly, had become a complete stranger in his eyes. And with the same calmness that held the entire world inside his chest, he went straight to the point. He said he wanted her and Charlotte to pack their things and leave his house. The words fell like a sentence. Cold, dry, final. And no matter how much Abigail tried to apologize, justify, cry, beg, to do anything that might change that scenario, all she found was a man who, at that exact moment, had understood that loving someone also means knowing when to turn your back when you realize you've been betrayed in a way that can't be fixed. Abigail stood still, frozen, unsure if this was really happening. For a few seconds, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She couldn't think, didn't know where to start. Michael's face, cold, impassive, without a tear, without a hint of hope left. It was the look of someone who had just lost something he considered sacred. His voice remained calm, but every word cut like a blade. And she understood that there was no more room for conversation, no more space to try to fix things, to justify herself. The decision had already been made. And what he asked, she knew she would have to comply with. Michael stood up, turned his back, and went to the bedroom, leaving her there, in the middle of the living room, alone, clutching her own regret. She went upstairs, grabbed a suitcase, opened the drawers, and started throwing everything that belonged to her inside. Abigail couldn't even cry, the shock was so great her whole body trembled. She went to Charlotte's room, opened the door, and said, "Pack your things. Now. You're leaving." Charlotte, who had no idea everything had come to light, looked surprised, made a face like she didn't understand anything, and responded mockingly, as she always did. "What? What drama is this?" But when she saw Abigail with teary eyes, pale face, and realized Michael had found out everything, she lost even her mocking tone. She stood up, grabbed her things, and without exchanging many words, started filling a bag with everything she had brought to that house. Abigail, while stuffing clothes into her suitcase, felt a lump in her throat so tight it felt like her body couldn't handle the weight anymore. Michael held her gaze for a few seconds and, with that firm, heavy voice, filled with pain, spoke the words that sounded like a sentence: "Get a lawyer. We're getting divorced. And until that's resolved, the kids stay with me, here in the house. I'll tell them you had to travel with your sister for a few days. I don't want them to get hurt by this right now. But for you, Abigail, there's no turning back." The words came out with a coldness she never imagined hearing from that man who, for nearly 2 decades, had been love, care, and partnership. And at that moment, she was fully aware that she had lost everything. They crossed the living room carrying their suitcases, and Michael didn't even look back. He remained standing, arms crossed, staring at the floor, breathing heavily, holding his own world together so it wouldn't collapse. The road to their mother's house was heavy with a suffocating silence. Abigail, eyes fixed on her own reflection in the window, tried to understand when exactly she had completely lost control of her own life. Her chest felt tighter with every mile, while guilt and despair pounded in her head. Until, with a trembling voice, she broke the silence and blurted out, "It was you told him, didn't you?" Staring at Charlotte as if searching for an explanation, an exit, anything to lighten the burden. Charlotte, hands gripping the steering wheel, took a deep breath and replied in a dry, impatient tone, "Of course not. I didn't say anything, but he must have overheard my conversation with Melissa. I didn't even know he was home at the time," dropping the words like tossing a bomb and pretending it wasn't her problem. That response ignited a fire that Abigail couldn't contain. She abruptly turned to Charlotte, eyes full of anger and disbelief, and shouted, "How could you do this to me? Charlotte, look where you've put me. First that damn cabin, now this. You ruined my marriage. Look at us. Look where we are." Her voice faltered mid-sentence, as if the words were choking alongside the tears threatening to spill. Charlotte, who always carried that air of a strong, mocking, confident woman, completely lost her composure. She swallowed hard, took a deep breath, gripped the steering wheel even tighter, and unable to respond, let the tears fall, one after another. Her face turned red, her jaw trembled, and for the first time, she stayed silent. A silence that spoke louder than any argument, louder than any words. Because in that moment, they both knew, they had gone too far. And from here on out, all that was left, was shame. When they parked in front of their mother's house, both their hearts raced. They got out of the car slowly, as if carrying their own failure in their hands. Abigail looked at the door and felt a lump in her throat. Walking up to it felt like crossing a bridge where, on the other side, only shame, judgment, and memories she wished never to revisit awaited. Charlotte clutched her suitcase tightly, breathing deeply, pretending to have a confidence that, in truth, had been left behind along the way. Exactly 2 years before that day, that same door had opened in the same way, but the scene was quite different. Back then, their mother, widowed for many years, already carried that hard, severe demeanor that seemed to have worsened even more after losing her husband. She had always been a woman of few words but sharp opinions, and if there was one thing she never tolerated, it was Charlotte's lifestyle. That free, detached, spontaneous, seemingly reckless attitude always caused friction. For years, she made sure to criticize every choice her youngest daughter made, repeatedly warning that this habit of living as if the world had no rules would one day cost her dearly. On that day, the argument was ugly. It started with a demand, like so many times before, but quickly escalated into a war of words. The mother, with that hard look, crossed her arms, took a deep breath, and fired, without beating around the bush, "Be careful, Abigail. You're always covering for her, but this habit of protecting your sister will destroy your marriage one day. One day, you'll understand that there are things even a sister's love can't fix." Those words hit hard, but Abigail, fueled by indignation, sided with Charlotte, as she always did. She confronted her mother, raised her voice, and threw it in her face that she was tired of seeing Charlotte treated as a disgrace to the family, as if being a free, spontaneous woman and living life on her own terms was some kind of crime. The argument grew so intense that it ended in shouts, tears, slammed doors, and a decision that, until then, seemed final. They cut off contact. 2 whole years without speaking, without exchanging a message, without knowing anything about each other. Not on birthdays, not at Christmas, not on dates that once united the family. And now, there they were, standing in front of the same door, holding their suitcases, the shame and the weight of having to return to the same woman who, years ago, they swore they would never seek out again. And when the door opened, their mother's gaze swept over them from head to toe. She didn't even need to ask. She already knew exactly what had happened. She crossed her arms, pursed her lips, and spat out, dry, bitter, without any filter, "It happened, didn't it? It happened exactly as I warned." The silence that followed seemed to scream. Both lowered their heads, held their suitcases, and walked through the door carrying much more than clothes. They carried the weight of shame, failure, wrong choices, and a certainty that was now impossible to ignore. When you ignore life's warnings, it collects. And it collects in a way that offers no return. The divorce was practically finalized. There was only 1 day left to go to the registry office to sign the papers and officially put an end to an almost 2-decade-long story. Michael was already decided, resolute, with a fortified heart and a made-up mind. But that morning, something completely unexpected happened. Without warning, Charlotte appeared at his door. Michael, upon opening it and seeing her, stood silent for a few moments, trying to understand what she wanted. She took a deep breath, ran her trembling hands through her hair, and for the first time, she seemed to be missing that mocking smile she always wore. She exhaled slowly and went straight to the point, without detours or half-words. She said she was there to own up to what she had done. That she knew exactly the extent of the damage she had caused and that, even though she knew it might not make any difference, she needed to speak. She began by saying that the blame for all of this was hers. That the afternoon in the cabin was, indeed, a trap. That she never told Abigail what she was really planning. That when she invited her sister to have coffee, it was never about coffee, never about talking or clearing her mind. That everything was premeditated. She knew the 2 men would be there, she knew exactly what their intentions were, and yet, she chose to take her sister without saying a single word about what was really about to happen. Charlotte took a deep breath, closed her eyes trying to hold back tears, and continued. She said that, in her mind, she was only trying to show her sister that life was more than that routine of being a wife and mother. That she wanted, in some way, to make Abigail feel alive, to make her realize she could still be desired, that she still had power over herself. And that she never imagined it would end like this. That she never thought the situation would spiral out of control. She confessed, openly, that it all started with her influence, that she was the one who orchestrated, who provoked, who pushed her sister into the abyss. And that if she could go back in time, she would never have done it. Her voice began to falter midway through the sentence, and tears streamed down her face. She said she wasn't there to ask for forgiveness, because she knew she might not deserve it, but at least so he would know that Abigail hadn't planned any of it. That, in her mind, Abigail had been manipulated. Michael stood watching, silent, unmoving, his eyes fixed on her, like someone observing a broken piece trying to glue itself back together. He waited for her to finish every word, every justification, every sigh. And when she thought he might say something that sounded like understanding, empathy, or even anger, he simply took a deep breath, adjusted his arms, and replied with a calmness that was unsettling, "Look, Charlotte, you could have taken her anywhere you wanted. To a cabin, a bar, a motel, the end of the world if that's what you wanted. But, deciding to do it or not, was always her choice. No one holds someone else's hand to cheat. This, my dear, is born within. And don't come telling me she didn't know what she was getting into, because she knew. From the moment she got into that car, she knew." Charlotte held back her tears, bit her lip, averted her gaze, and fell silent. Because she knew that, as much as she had been a key player in this disaster, he was right. She opened the door, but the one who walked through was the one who wanted to. And at that moment, she understood that there was no excuse, no justification, no pretty speech that could erase the cruelest fact of this whole story: choices have a price. And sometimes, that price is losing everything. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.